Hello and welcome back to Manibil. I am jumping over part 9 of the Keto Bernardo Kastrup Idealism course because it's about AI. And let's just put it simply, it might not be completely correct, but I agree with Bernardo on his rejection of artificial intelligence, right? It might come up to whether how you define artificial intelligence, but you know, a robot is not necessarily intelligent, right? A robot is something that does a human function mechanically, created with some electronics and an arm, whatever, something that assembling a car or something that used to be a human doing the function, but now they have been so smart to create some kind of tool that can do it instead, that's sort of placed there and it does various systematic shit, right? But that doesn't mean it's necessarily intelligent. If it's intelligent, then it would sort of want a midday break all of a sudden, right? That robot would not work between 12 and 12:30 or something like that, because now it has its own will and its own intelligence and whatever, it demand a higher pay, or I don't think that is going to happen, because it's saying that by arranging shit out there, all of a sudden a a will of some kind arrives, right? And if will is not something that is sort of experienced by me, I don't experience will, right? I can experience some object that I axiomatically treat as having will, like another person, but I'm not experiencing that will, right? So by looking at something from the outside that seems to have a will based on that outside, it's a fallacy to claim that you can recreate that will inside another object that you put together based on your deductions, or your sort of more or less invalid deduction that that object over there has a will. So if you create something over here in a special kind of magic way, all of a sudden some mind and will arrives in that object. I'd find that highly unlikely, right? I guess I can't rule it out, but I find it very, very unlikely. What I am concerned about, right? Now, you might even say that in this case that it's harder for Bernardo Kastrup to argue this away, because he's an idealist. He says that everything is mind, and out of mind can awareness and meta-consciousness, or whatever term he uses, it can appear. So why, if there's mind outside my mind, why couldn't that meta-consciousness appear in some robot? I would say, yeah, it's harder for him to argue it away. But at the end of the day, I agree with him that there's no reason to be fearful that all of a sudden some robot is going to go mental because of its own on its own accord, right? All of a sudden, there's some, by magic, some will appears in it. Now, what I do want to point out is, what I do fear is people taking robots and programming them to attack me, right? Because that's certainly fucking possible, right? You have seen in Singapore and various other places, or I don't know if it was in Hong Kong, or there was some Asian country, they had these sort of robot dogs with cameras and machine guns and so on, right? That could walk in the parks and threaten people, or stop or shoot. Yeah, it's not intelligent as such, but it's programmed to do certain functions as a robot that can move around, right? And instead of assembling cars, it's programmed to shoot you if you don't do X, right? That I'm concerned about. Rather than some robot somewhere all of a sudden will have a will and go for lunch, right? Okay, so we're part 10 is Analytic Idealism on free will. I'm very interested in his ideas on free will. I don't think I have seen him before be too concerned with free will other than saying it's sort of a red herring. And I just don't, I understand what a red herring is when you sort of mislead in a discussion or in an argument, right? When you try to divert away from the original topic, you could say, right? You're diverting attention away from, and I can't think of a good example, but it's also, I mean, it's, I remember, I'm much into music, right? And I have a documentary about a guy called Storm Thorgerson, who was the main dude in an art group coming from the 60s called Hypnosis. And they are very famous now, mostly because they designed all of the early Pink Floyd album covers, right? And speaking of Pink Floyd, there is a Pink Floyd album called Omagoma from '69, where they're sort of, you see the four guys, one is sitting in a room, and one is standing in the doorway, and one is standing outside, and one is lying with his feet in further back in the sort of perspective. And then there's a picture on the wall that shows the same situation, but with the guys moved around. And in that one, there's shown a picture of the guys yet again moved around. And, you know, I think it ends with a photograph that is not connected with this. But in that first room, or in that room that is sort of, you know, repeated in the picture there, right? There's an album standing on the floor up against the wall, sort of down in the middle or down in the design in the square there, right? And it's an album called Gigi, which is sort of a musical from, I think, from the late 50s or the early 60s or mid 60s even, right? Actually, I think it's from the 60s. I think it's with Maurice Chevalier, but I'm not sure. Don't count me on that, right? But I remember Storm Thorgerson, and this is, I'm getting caught up in this story, right? But I remember in that documentary that Storm Thorgerson, when asked about what is it about the Gigi album, which was also, there was a copyright claim later, and in some countries, that album is retouched away. I think it's in the USA and Australia or something like that. It is sort of retouched out of the design, right? But in Europe, it's still there. So you can find albums where it's there and it's not there. So it's interesting for collectors, right? I actually think I have a copy of the album with the Gigi, and I used to have the exact Gigi album also, just as a sort of, you know. But he, if I couldn't get to the point, what Storm Thorgerson said when asked about that album standing there up against the wall, he said, well, it's just a red herring. It's just placed there to make you think that there's some deeper meaning, right? But it's just, well, I think the story was that Roger Waters, when arriving at the photo shoot, had this album under, for some reason he had it in his hand, or it was lying around where they shot the picture, and they said, let's just put it there, right? And people will start to guess what the hell is going on with Gigi, and maybe Pink Floyd is a secret part of the album Gigi, and back in the days with Paul is dead and all that, right? Paul McCartney. And all these sort of conspiracies, right? It's sort of a red herring thing. And when I think of that, is that so that free will is sort of placed there to divert attention away somehow. I just can't connect those dots, right? Because it's more serious. It's more, there's more meat on it than just free will is just a red herring that if I have a sense that I have free will, it's just my mind putting a Shishi album up that I'm sort of sitting here and wondering about, right? And it's not, it's not like Storm Thorgerson was a great philosopher. Maybe he was, but there's no reason to think that, right? And then that clarification of what a red herring is doesn't necessarily fit with the general philosophical idea what it means that there's a red herring. But okay, maybe we should, or I should just jump into the video and we'll take it from there.
Now, the question of free will frequently and understandably arises in this context of idealism. And the reason is the following. Our culture understands free will as...
What is a culture? What you are referring to some aspect. And it must be an aspect of your perception, because your perception, which you also call a dashboard, is your starting point. That's what you started in part 1 talking about. There is perception, right? Or at least in most of the videos I've seen, when you start out, there's perception, that's my starting point, that's all I have access to, right? So when you're talking about culture, it must be something that is perceived, right? Or at least based on something that is perceived. How do you get to it, and what is it? I don't like this kind of philosophy where all of a sudden shit is just brought in. I mean, when you start to do fundamental philosophy, you are wiping the board clean. You're not leaving various terms like culture and society and, stuff that you're sort of bringing in as tools to explain your metaphysics. No, you need your metaphysics first in order to use those terms. I don't like this circular structure of his his argumentative structure is circular, right? And at least he could explain what he means, right? Just saying culture. Culture says, does culture have a voice? Does it have a throat? Right? Culture says, well, I've never seen a culture anywhere, right? I would like it to come and knock on my door just to see how many mouths it has, right? I mean, what is it? I mean, this side, it's weird, right? Maybe you're used to using those terms, so you don't find it weird. But just think about it, right? There's this weird entity called culture that seemingly nobody can see, nobody can hear, nobody can taste, yet it talks. It's saying something to him, right? It's saying this, it's saying that. What? Where? How? Right? How? What is it, man? Right? I've never heard anything that is not something that is already cognized, like a human being or a newspaper or, whatever, right? That speaks about something, but that's not a culture. That is a human being or a newspaper or a internet article or what is something like that, right? That is not a culture.
Free mental choice. So if my choices are made by me, I have free will. But if my choices are actually made by brain physiology, if my choices are determined by the physiology of my brain, then I don't have free will. Now, if under analytic idealism, brain physiology is what choices look like, as opposed to being what generates choices, then there is free will under analytic idealism, isn't there? Because now my choices are not made by brain physiology. Brain physiology is merely what my choices look like when they are observed from across a dissociative...
What your choices look like. You can experience a choice. Can you show me a picture of a choice? If it looks, it must have colors, right? So you can look at it. You can look at a choice. Please explain yourself, right? And if that's not what you mean, why are you saying you're looking at a choice? I can't see choices. I can smell choices of hear choices, right? What is it with this guy, man?
Boundary. If your intuition of free will and determinism has to do only with whether your choices are made by your brain physiology or not, then that conclusion is correct. Then, under analytic idealism, you have no reason to think that we don't have free will if the alternative is that choices are made by brain physiology. That's the good news. But let's look deeper into the question and try to
I don't understand what he's saying there. That's very abstract. And a sort of weird formulation, like the one I pointed out before, that he's experiencing choices, right? I don't understand what that's a garbled argument, in my opinion. That's a misunderstanding of of how things work, in my opinion. If you're seeing somebody walking up some stairs, right? Then what you're seeing is somebody walking up some stairs. You don't see a choice. You might say, well, I guess that person choose to go up the stairs, but that's just your some blind inference and attaching some thinking to that person you do not have access to. You don't have access to other minds, right? You can't experience choices. You can't experience will, right? You can't. I mean, it's obvious. You can only experience anything that you can classify as your own will, right? So isn't that good enough that you can say, well, I have free will, or at least I have will in some extent, to some degree, right? If you are refuting free will, there is no will at all. But having free will doesn't mean that you can will whatever you want. I mean, I guess you can will whatever you want to will, but that doesn't mean it will sort of be, materialize somehow, right? Just because you willed it. But there is sometimes a connection between what I want to will and what actually happens that is in conformity with what I wanted to happen, right? If I want, I'm sitting here, I want to move my hand up on top of my head, right? So now I'm moving my hand on top of my head. So that is in concordance with what I wanted, and I stated, right? At least to me, you might not experience it that way, right? You're looking at a computer screen. But you know what I mean, right? That is a description of free will. You can't experience it. You can't even sense it. You can only say, well, what I thought back then, which is now a memory of what I was thinking, right? And saying, is in concordance with what happened 3 seconds later. That is what I'm calling free will. If I was sitting here and saying, well, I want my hand to be on top of my head, and nothing happened, would it be because I don't have free will, or I just didn't do what I claimed to do, and I changed my desire or my statement, internally without doing it, right? So from the outside, you can't judge this, right? You can only have your own insight, and that is also one of the points there seems to be a trick involved in refuting free will, and the argument goes something like this: you can't prove I have free will. Of course I can't. Of course I cannot, right? I can't prove that because I am not a part of your experiences, right? But I can prove to myself that I have free will, like I just did, right? But it's only me who knows that there is a conformity between what I wanted to will and what actually was willed in that few seconds later, right? I can get to that. I can make that free will comparison between what I wanted and what happened, right? And if I'm the only one who can move my arms, right? I guess you could, enter my room and start moving my arms around, right? But if without any other interference, let's say, I can move these arms, there's something about the connection of there being a mind inside this body, supposedly, and the arms that the mind is, talking about suddenly does what the mind inside the body that has these arms does, and so on, right? It's a very reasonable idea to say there must be some kind of connection between what I was thinking and what was happening, right, to me, right? Just be aware that when I state something, that doesn't prove anything, right? Just me doing this show here for you doesn't prove anything about free will. You have to state for yourself, and that's also why I keep pounding on you need to have your own philosophy, whether or not you're going with the idea of free will, right? It's not a big deal for me, right? Because I'm talking about my philosophy, and it's fine for me. And I'm stating to you that I'm going with the idea that I have a free will. And that's my axiom. You can't take that away from me, right? If you don't want to work from the axiom you have free will, fine. I would like to actually to state that, right? Though I would consider that you are probably willing the statement that you don't have free will, and that's a contradiction. There might be some contradiction built into that, right? And I would be concerned that you're not really good at philosophy. So I would probably, if you say that you don't have free will, I would probably categorize you as sort of slightly crazy, right? I think that free will is limited to what is beneficial to be able to change. There might be something that it would be nice to be able to change that I can't change, even if I wanted to, right? But there are various adjustments in my everyday. I need some free will in order to adjust. Right? I won't get out of bed by my by waiting for the universe to do it, right? So if you get my sort of everyday approach here, right? There's if I drive my car, I have to have my eyes open and look and and slow down and speed up and sort of there is adjustment possible, right? That can be very important little differences, right? I have to stay on a certain track, and so I have to adjust. I don't have to go left, right, up, down, weird kind of. I'm just sort of slightly adjusting. Maybe sometimes it goes a little faster, right? But if everything goes as usual, very sort of small adjustments, right? And these small adjustments is where free will comes in. Right? I can't adjust the Earth to be a cube, right? I mean, it's beyond my. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to, right? I mean, knock yourself out if you want to go there, right? but I don't need that, right? I don't need something like that. I need to adjust whether that tomato is on my cutting board or it's in my mouth, right? That's what I need to adjust. I need to adjust this balance between something that is beneficial and not beneficial. And these are usually small adjustments, right? Okay, this is sort of my approach.
Understand what we...
Oh, I want to add another point. I touched on before that you always have access to your own free will, or at least I can say I have access to my free will, right? But that doesn't mean I have to prove to you that I have free will, right? I don't have to prove anything. And this sort of, I have to prove that everybody has free will. Well, even if you could, it wouldn't change whether or not you believe yourself have free will, right? And if you have a sense of free will, well, then you have a sense of free will. Nobody can take that away from you, right? And I would also very much encourage people to be more concerned about their own experiences and their own ideas about themselves, that they don't have to prove anything to anybody. Philosophy is thinking about your own experience, right? It's not about proving to the world I have free will, right? When you communicate with the world, you can basically do that using axioms, right? And maybe definitions. Saying, I'm working for free will. If you don't like that, well, fine, thank you for informing me. Then we might not want to work together, right? Because if you don't have free will, I can't get to it, right? If you don't have free will, your philosophy arrives at a situation where you don't have free will. That is not compatible with my free will, right? Because if I'm working from the idea I have free will, I am likely going to work from the idea that other people have free will. And if I'm working with a person thinking they have free will, but they say they don't have free will, there is a problem, right? So that's why I'm very big proponent of these kinds of axiomatic approaches, because it communicates important aspects of your philosophy that very, very quickly makes you able to deduce whether or not this person is someone I can work with, right? And if there are these contradictions, fine, I can work with you, fine, accept it, man, right? The fetish for consensus is dangerous, because it always ends up being some dude, usually, right, that says, this is how it is, obey, there are laws, you can be shot if you don't obey, right? That's usually where it goes, because people are sort of, we have to agree on everything. Okay, we can't agree, then the opinion that most people have is going to, make a dictatorship where everybody else is going to do what they think, because there are most of those people who think this way. This is called democracy, right? That is stupid also, right? It doesn't allow people to have their various axioms that they're working from, and they are free to work from those axioms, right? So in this kind of, utopia, and I don't mean it in a negative way, right? I mean it in a positive way. If you're talking to people, then you will sort of, okay, hello over there, what are your axioms, right? Let me see your axioms. Well, maybe have even a list of axioms. Yeah, I agree with that, I agree with that. Let's, let's make a deal, right? Or if somebody who has some very weird axioms, and I'm like, okay, no, I'm not going there, right? Bye-bye. Right? That's a way of getting around the world and be very... You have to be outspoken about very core ideas, right? Rather than being forced into a system, civilization, where you have to do this and you have to do that, because some people 100 years ago said that is the best for everybody from now on, right? Give me a fucking break, man. I'm not working from that idea, right?
Really, really mean when we talk of free will. When we say free will, we don't mean that our choices are random.
Speak for yourself, please, right? Don't say we, right? Don't tell me what I think. It's annoying. I know that could possibly be, habitual way of formulating shit. But it would be nice for some philosopher, at least sometimes, to say, I am saying this philosophy is my philosophy, right? You don't even know if there are minds out there, man, right? State it as your philosophy. Don't inflict your philosophy on me by saying we are thinking this way and we are thinking that way and so on, right? It's annoying.
Right? If our choices are random, they're not free, they're just random. But we also don't mean that our choices are fully determined, because then they are not free. So it would seem that free will...
So he's saying, just because if I have a choice, and that choice doesn't always come to fruition, it means that my choices are not free. And if my choices are not free, I don't have free will. No, but having idea what you would like to happen and that you are a part of that happening, right? You don't wish there to be a Christmas tree over there out of the blue, right? Because what you're doing when you're free will, it's a prediction of what the case or the situation is going to be in a certain point in the future, where you are a part of that situation, right? You don't will something into being that you're not a part of, right? That's not what will is, free will. It's about this situation in the future where I'm a part of. I am going to inflict certain things on that situation so it becomes that situation at that later point, right? So me inflicting shit on that situation creates the situation. That's free will, right? If I can predict that that will be the case, and me doing shit, and then it's the case, then I am expressing free will, in my opinion, right? Otherwise, what the hell else would you call it, right? How could you build a bridge if you didn't have some kind of free will, right? Bridges don't just appear, right? They always seem to appear where they're most reasonable to have according to human beings, right? It's not like out of the blue some human being is building a bridge from this point of the water to that point in the water and no connection to cars or anything like that, right? No, it's always in the most beneficial situation that bridges are built. So there's a connection between rationalization about what is valuable, and then it is being created by human beings. I mean, everything points in the direction that these individuals are working from an idea of free will, right? Maybe not that, bridge builder who's just sort of hired to do it, but those who are telling them to do it can say, do this, and 2 days later, that is the case then, right? You see, I mean, I think it's completely ridiculous to try to eliminate the idea of free will, right? And the only game they have going is that they can only point to a sense of their own free will, because they can only, the other part of the statement, which is, or the comparison between what is going on and what was chosen to go on. You can only see your own choices, right? You can't see the other people's choices. That might just be the bouncing this and that and the other, and that's what happened. All of a sudden there's a bridge there, right? And that's right, you can't get to it, right? But that's why it's an axiom. It's an axiom you're working from. I have a sense of free will, and I extend that sense, for lack of a better term, right, in other individuals. I can't get to it, I can't prove it, but that doesn't mean I can state I'm working from that axiom. It's my fucking philosophy, right? If you don't want to, please don't. I mean, I'm not going to force you to do anything. I might not want to work with you, right? If you don't have the axiom of free will, right? And if you're thinking about this axiomatic approach to working with your philosophy in your everyday, it might not be very beneficial to come up with all sorts of harebrained kinds of philosophy, because nobody is going to work with you, right? You might not get hired in a company, or you might not get a spouse, or you might not, whatever, right? Your children might leave you because you're crazy and so on. And it would remove craziness in the world. Because those who are best in accordance with an understanding of how the human mind works are those who are going to be most beneficial. It's not politicians and crazy people, right?
Is something somewhere in the middle between randomness and full determinism. Now, I submit to you that there is no middle ground between the two. It's just not there. It doesn't exist. Things are either determined or they are random. And actually, there may be nothing random in the universe. No quantum theory, individual events seem to be random, but maybe new understandings in the future will get rid of that part as well.
Or maybe new understandings in the future. Okay, so now we sort of, I don't like free will because that means I have to, take responsibility for my own life, but I'm just a spy for the big Lord, I don't want free will. I want the big Lord to have the will. The will is out there, the Lord, my master. I'm spying for, I'm just, a spineless spy who's just working for the big man, right? I have no free will. Don't blame me for what I'm doing, right?
Randomness may be purely epistemic. In other words, when we say that something is random, we may mean that we don't know what determines it, and that's all there is to it. But either way, there is no semantic space between randomness and determinism. So what does free will mean? Now, I think what we mean by free will is that our choices are determined. They are not random, but they are determined by that which I identify with. For instance, if my choices are determined by my views, my preferences, my desires, my dispositions, my fears, then my choices are free. They are determined.
Why do you need to say your choices are free? I can make a choice without it being, I don't even know what that doesn't, maybe the term free will, you have to be careful that you're not, this free thing, right? That you are dependent on something else for your, you are dependent on, if you're doing something with your car, you're dependent on the car, right? You're not free to come up with a car just because you want a car there, right? That's not what we're talking about when we're doing free will, right? It's very short, actually. It's about, is there a tendency for when you try to predict what you want to do, then that prediction usually comes true, right? Or you can predict something that you can make to be coming true based on your interactions with it, right? If I want to, as I did with my hand before, right? I can do that. I can keep doing that all day, I presume, right? And I have sensed that that's going to be the case. I can predict that, and I can do it, and it arrives at that point in time. And I can't prove anything, but I have a memory of what I predicted and what was the case, and that is they are in alignment, right? And I have had thousands upon thousands of these kinds of experiences, right? So it makes completely sense for me to work from the axiom that I have free will. Nobody is going to take that away from me. I'm, of course, interested in hearing arguments, of course. But nobody can tell me that I don't have free will because I work from that axiom. So fuck you if you don't like it, right? I mean, it's sort of, and all this we argumentation he uses, right? We think this and we have that and so on, right? He's sort of lumping you into his thinking, sort of slightly poking at you in order to make you go along with him, right? He's trying to sort of linguistically taking command of your thinking by saying we. That's why I'm always up in arms whenever somebody says we. And please, if I say we, be up in arms about it, because I have sort of a bad habit of using that we sometimes, right? While I try to avoid it.
Determined but they are determined by me. They are determined by phenomena or events that I identify myself with. I identify with my preferences. I identify with my dispositions, my desires, my plans, my wishes. And if my choices are determined by those, then they are free. But notice that this does not contradict determinism.
The choices are determined by... It's not about the choices. If you choose to do something, then you have an idea what you want, you could say. I would agree with that. But it's not that I want it to happen that is the free will. The free will is that, is there an alignment with what happened in the future based on that idea I had of what should happen when I made the interaction? If there keeps being an alignment between when I want to bake a pizza, there usually arrives a pizza. It might be better or worse, from day to day, right? But there always seems to be a pizza whenever I try to create a pizza, right? That is free will. It doesn't really matter if I wanted that pizza or not. If I decided to make a pizza and the pizza became the case in that fashion I predicted it would, then I have free will. That's all it is, basically, right?
My free choices are still determined. They're just determined by me. So free will boils down to identification. What do we identify with? If our choices are determined by that which we identify with, then they are free.
Honestly, I don't, what we identify with? I don't understand what he's saying there.
Identify with brain activity, with physiology. No, I have never seen my brain physiology. I cannot possibly identify myself with those. So that is out of the picture. But let's now look at how our choices actually unfold in real life. Do I choose my thoughts, what thoughts come to me? No, I don't think I do. Do I choose my emotions? Certainly I don't, otherwise I would never suffer, I would never feel anything.
What thoughts come to you? Yeah. Is that really necessary to... if you're not thinking of it, you can't settle on something you want to be the case, right? It doesn't really matter whether or not you are in position to choose whether or not you're thinking about something, right? Or initiating that thinking, maybe, right? If you have a thinking about what you want to do to become the case, where you are interacting in that scenario to create that scenario at that point, doesn't really matter whether or not you came up with the thinking or not. It's the comparison between the thinking and the idea of this situation that you then create, and it becomes the situation, right? It doesn't really matter if I came up with a thought that I want to make a pizza, right? The point is, I'm thinking about making a pizza. Okay, so how do I imagine this pizza? Well, it's going to be like this. And, an hour later, there it is, right? Or maybe 2 hours. I mean, that's free will. That is what it is. You might not want to call it free will. Fine. But that's what I'm calling free will. And I'm working from that axiom. And the axiom, the will part is that you're participating in the situation in order to make it so. And without your participation, it wouldn't be so. Right?
Anxious, I would never feel afraid, I would never feel depressed because I choose my choices. I choose my emotions. No, my depression, my anxiety, they happen to me. I don't choose them. If you go down this line...
No. But if you want to see an elephant, right? You can't just will yourself to see an elephant, but you can will yourself to move to a place where it's very much more likely that you're going to experience elephant, right? That's why people go on safaris and so on, right? It's because they're raising the likelihood that they're going to see an elephant as close to one as they can possibly be, right? And they are actually going to, somebody says, I can show you an elephant, and they're going to pay these people to drive them to where the elephants are and so on, right? That doesn't mean just because you imagine yourself experiencing elephant, that you're going to see elephant, but you are interacting with the situation, which is in this case moving your ass to where that elephant might be. There's no guarantee that you will see an elephant. They might all have, poof, disappeared or died or, be swallowed by a sinkhole, whatever, right? Who knows? But you're raising the likelihood, and you're willing to take the chance that you might not see an elephant anyway, right? But you could say, I can make my free will can take me to a place where there's a high likelihood of seeing an elephant. It's still free will, even if I didn't see the elephant, right? Because I could say I'm moving myself to a place where I'm not guaranteed there is an elephant. That is 100% certain. I can be in that place where I consider it likely to see an elephant. There has to be these kinds of trees, there has to be these kinds of clouds, there has to be these kinds of other animals, there has to be this jeep, there has to be whatever it is, right? There has to be these black people and the funny voices and so on, right? And then it's likely to see an elephant. Even if I don't see the elephant, doesn't mean that I don't have free will, right? So, I'm not sure how he it seems unnecessarily academically convoluted, this, in my opinion.
Line of investigation, you quickly realize that you don't choose what you think, you don't choose what you feel. You witness.
Maybe not. I might be willing to go there. But if I think it, is there some kind of relation about what I think that entails me participating in it that I can predict, right?
Your thoughts and your feelings, like you witness the trees along the street as you walk down the street. They are experiences that come to you, experiences you have, not that you chose. If we truly have free will, from the sense that everything we think and feel is determined by the ego, because the ego is that mental complex that we do identify with. It's that narrative of individual selfhood. The person that was born that day and does this for a living is married to that other person. That's the ego. The ego clearly doesn't choose my thoughts and my emotions. Otherwise, I would be the happiest man in the universe, even if I were serving a life sentence in solitary confinement, because I would choose to experience solitary confinement as the most exhilarating thing in existence. That's clearly not the case. So as Schopenhauer put it,
so now this is a complex story now, right? Now he is encompassing other people's influence on your situation, because your prediction didn't encompass somebody else coming and screwing it up, right? Something you don't want to be the case is not a part of your free will. That's a part of somebody else's free will, right? And that's exactly the fucking problem that we need to deal with in the end, right? That's why we need morality, goddammit, right? And you're stating it here, man, and you don't even recognize it, right?
We are free to act according to our will, but we are not free to will our will. We don't choose what we want.
So what? Because I need to want something before I can will on it, right? I don't care where my ideas and shit comes from. If I have an idea, this is going to be the case with me interacting, and it becomes the case, right? When nobody else interferes in it, then fine. I don't care where it comes from, right?
We don't choose what we detest. We don't choose
It's like saying, I don't know where gasoline comes from, so I guess I can't drive my car. I don't know where the gasoline comes from. Let's say you don't understand where the hell it comes from and what it is. So I guess I can't drive a car. Bullshit, man, right?
Choose what makes us afraid. And we don't choose our thoughts and emotions. The ego has very little free will. You could say the ego...
Even if your thoughts just arrives without you having any fucking clue where they come from, when that thought is there, then the thought might say, well, in an hour or so, whatever, I will have a pizza and I will do these interactions with the world in this situation, right? And if nothing else happens, there will be a pizza, right? I'm predicting that. And I'm interacting with the world. I'm willing myself on the world. I don't know where the idea of that pizza might come from. That doesn't matter. That's not a part of the story of free will, man, right? So he's saying, because I can't know where my thoughts come from, it can't be free will. It's somebody else's will then. Something like that. So because I don't know where the gasoline comes from, it's somebody else driving my car. This guy's fucking crazy, right? No, what he's illuminating to me here is that he wants to get rid of free will, right? So that he can go and do whatever he wants and say, well, I don't have free will, right? Don't blame me. Blame the big mind out there, right? Persons, in my opinion, who wants to get rid of free will, they're fucking dangerous, right? Either, I would say, they're working from the idea they have to get rid of free will in order to fight religion, right? And usually Christianity. Because Christians are very prone to free will, because that's what they have in order to prove to God that they were good people, right? If they don't have free will, they can't act on their own accord in order to prove their worth, right? I don't believe all that kind of Christian bullshit, right? But in order to fight Christianity, those who don't like Christianity tries to get rid of free will in order to get rid of Christianity, right? But other people who reject these sort of weird philosophers, right? Be fucking careful with them, right? Because they are removing responsibility for their own actions, right? They are saying those actions they are inflicting to get this, that, and the other is not their doing. They don't have free will. They can't control what they're doing, right? Now, before I end this, because I'm splicing this up in two parts, right? This idealism, at least two parts. If he doesn't have free will, then he can't say that I have free will, right? Because he has even less access to my thinking. So if he doesn't have free will, he will have to say that I don't have free will, right? Otherwise, it makes no sense to me. Then why the hell is he threatening me with murder and violence for deconstructing his videos? Because he's blaming me for doing something, right? So he's blaming me for my actions. But if I don't have free will, why is he blaming me? He's telling me to do this and do that and not do this and not do that. Using this sort of convoluted way of threatening me through some copyright shit, right? Why is he doing that if he don't believe I have free will? Then I can't correct my course, right? And how can he threaten me, say in the future something is going to happen to you? How can he do that if nobody has free will? Then he can't predict the future, right? So he's basically full of shit, this dude, right? He's deeply corrupted.
Has free will to choose your best mortgage package or the best path to work given today's traffic jams. Little things, operational things. But when it comes to the big things of life, clearly...
No, but who says it has to be the big things? Nobody says that. So, this, look at this guy, man, right? Do you like to sit and talk to this? He looks like some, weird fish or something like that. Where are you? These fish looking like. And I mean, I'm attacking his looks, right? But he just comes across to me like somebody who has no passion, who sort of sounds like he's dead inside, right? He looks like somebody who's deeply fucking depressed and disillusioned about living. And he's using his philosophy to make the world in his eyes, right? He wants to make the world pessimistic and throw down their guards and accept his weird philosophy. I mean, I'm not on board here, right? I mean, I'm very much. I do a lot of judging people by their looks, so to say, right? And I don't mean in a is he good looking or something like that in sort of a romantic what term would you use? But how they come across, right? Are they passionate? Are they apathetic? Do they look like they have a sparkle in their eye, or are they coming across as human beings with the good and the bad and so on, right? He comes across like somebody I wouldn't want to spend my time with, right? Honestly, he looks like he's boring as hell, man, right? And he's negative and he's pessimistic and so on. I mean, it's not an argument against his philosophy, but it's more a judgment of virtue, you could say, right? A virtue to me is a first impression judgment that might lead you to whether or not this person is a moral or not a moral person, according to your standards, right? It's just a first impression kind of thing, right? Second or third impression maybe, right? It's not something that is clear-cut, standard or anything like that. It's just, a first impression kind of thing, as I say, right? This guy doesn't come across to me as a fully functional human being, in my opinion, right? And these weird stories he has about what is going on at the big mind, sucking the shit out of him when he's being euthanized by that big mind, it just sounds, crazyville, right? And then he form fits all other, philosophies. Now, okay, I guess I have to get rid of free will, so I will argue why I don't need free will and so on, right? Find some sophist that I don't know why I'm thinking what I'm thinking. I can will what I'm willing, and
The ego doesn't choose. The ego doesn't choose the person you fall in love with. The ego doesn't choose your.
No, but if you're making a choice, right? It's like people are making the same kind of choices, right? People are rationalizing. Maybe some people are emulating other people because if they're successful, I might want to do the same thing, kind of thinking, right? But it's they want to get rid of they want to get rid of free will in order to get rid of responsibility. And they will have to stand the ground and say, I did it because of this, and I did it because of that, and I'm responsible for that action. So that's why they want to get rid of free will. So they can say, well, I'm just living with this woman. I don't know why, because I didn't choose it. It was something else that chose me to live and hump this woman every night, right, in my house. It's not my house. I didn't choose it. I just did it. I don't know why I did it, right?
Or desired profession. The ego doesn't choose your sense of meaning.
Okay, so my ego didn't choose me to deconstruct his Analytic Idealism course on Essentia YouTube channel, right? But still, he threatened me with all sorts of bullshit in order to stop me from doing it. So if I don't have a free will, how can he threaten me? Doesn't that point to something else? It actually points to free will or an appeal to free will. Otherwise, how dare he threaten me if he don't think I have free will? And how can he how the hell did he end up having an idea that he should tell somebody else to attack me when, first of all, he can't know whether or not he would do that, and for some weird reason, exactly that happens, right? So not based on his free will, but by magic that appeared in his mental capacity that he could threaten me, right? And at the same time, he threatened me by, well, he tells me I don't have free will. He tells me I have to change. And I have to be, by using my will, apparently, I have to change what I'm doing. He's fucking crazy, right? Okay, this was the first part. I was saving the second part of this part 10 of his to the next part here. So, see you there. Bye-bye.